This is Jhoy app. So stay with me. Papasok po tayo diyan sa castle na yan. Ang Castle Dundarn. So yan po yung castle, the Dundarn Castle.
I like to talk outside for just a couple minutes though. Once we're inside the house, we're going to be talking about the McNabb family. They're the ones that lived here from when the house was constructed in 1835 all the way up to the 1860s. So not that long, all things together, but so there's of course a lot of use of this land before that family. If you go back 9,000 to 10,000 years, there was indigenous use of this land. Are you from the Hamilton area? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, super. So of course, in that direction is Hamilton Mountain, in that direction is Lake Ontario. Those are two really big obstacles, and so traveling in between them means that you have to go through this land right here. So this became a very natural place to meet and to trade and to travel through. York Boulevard's actually built on top of an indigenous trail. So that's the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe people that were using that land for all those thousands of years. The first European person to arrive here, his name was Richard Beasley, and he built a house that's actually underneath this one. That house was completed in the 1790s, and we'll actually see a tiny bit of it when we get down into the basement. So Beasley lived here up until the War of 1812. He was a merchant and a fur trader, so he wanted to be connected to all the trade that was already happening here. During the War of 1812, there was actually a military camp here. It wasn't like a full-on fort like you might see at Fort York or Fort George. It was just a fortified landscape. So if you look at that mound of earth right over there, then with the bush and the tree on top, that would have been like 8 to 10, 12 feet tall, and went all the way across the property with a big wooden fence on it and sharp pointy sticks pointed towards the south. So they had a few of those all across the property. It was just to slow down any invasion coming from the south and heading towards Toronto. After the war, this land was kind of messy because, of course, there was the military here, but also over 1,000 displaced people who moved here to seek protection from the British military. With the British military, not from the British military. After the war, when Sir Allan McNabb bought this property, he was basically building on top of a big mess. And so he built this huge house. We're going to go in the green door, and there's some at the front door, which is underneath the pillar, but we'll start with the curtain. Take a picture of you before you enter. Hey, here. Okay, so if you want to go all the way to the green chair there.
We're here inside the Dundarn Castle. Dundarn Castle.
The door in the corner that doesn't have a doorknob on it, that would be for downstairs servants, because if you open that door, you'd be right at the top of a set of stairs straight down into the basement. So those are for the downstairs servants who don't really interact with the family very much. So much so that they are never even on the same floor as the family. Those servants tend to get messy when they do their job, and the family doesn't want to interact with the messy servants. The door that we're going to go through is for upstairs servants. Those are servants that actually usually interact with the family. That's part of their job. They serve the family. They help the family get dressed. So we're going to use that entrance next to all the staircases so you can sanitize before you use the handrail and going up the stairs. In terms of photography, we ask no flash. There you go. Yeah.
Sanitize your hands.
On a bench or a chair in this room, you're welcome to. This is Erin, our cook. Hi, Erin.
Good. I almost didn't recognize you with your mask.
Yes, probably her.
Yes.
I know I look like a desperado.
Come on in, come on in. There's lots of room here in the kitchen. So as you can see, this great big space here in the basement, very bright, very modern. Any cook would be thrilled to work in a space like this. But it was a tough job, there's no doubt about that. This cook here was expected to prepare no less than 7 meals a day. She's cooking for both the family and for the servants, of course, but she's able to do it in a way that's a little easier than it was for other cooks. I mean, looking around, it certainly doesn't look like our modern kitchens, but for this time period, this is about as good as it's going to get. You have a gasolier over the table here, allowing for lots of extra light when needed, never during the daylight hours though. So this would be completely off. A little bit darker, but not too much because we have this free natural light streaming in through all of these glorious windows, which again, you probably aren't gonna find many of these in the average basement. So if our cook needs to read something, she just goes right up to the window and she's able to do that. Now, as for cooking, she has two different places she can do it. So she has an open hearth here, where you can boil, you can roast. Think of like shawarma, chalet, things like that. Like this, you put it right in front of the fire. Or you can bury your bake pots, you can boil soup. So a lot of one pot cooking over here. Whereas the range, you're able to do things that are a little more complicated. Now, as we head over towards the range, you can also see running water, which I'm sure Cindy's going to talk about at length. She has already. Running water at your fingertips. You don't have to go outside to get your water. And then, of course, a drainage system, so it just goes away on its own, making life so much easier for everyone else. But for the cook, she's less concerned with the water because she doesn't have to do the dishes. She has someone else to do that. So when I say 7 meals a day, it's not 7 meals a day plus cleanup. It's just cooking 7 meals a day. Now, this range here, this beautiful piece, was installed by the second owner of the home. So after the McNabs move out, a range is called a range because it does arrange for a variety of different things. And this one is doing lots of things right now. It's keeping the room nice and warm. You could boil and fry, you can bake, and the bake ovens are actually too hot to hold on to. I'm baking crackers right now. They're called cayenne cheeses. It's a historic recipe, the only kind of recipe we work with here in the house. And it takes a little bit longer because it's a little less steady of a heat. So if I was cooking them in a regular oven, 375, 12 minutes, we're done. Here, it's kind of until they're done. Just keep an eye on it closely. And then the top is a microwave, essentially. It's a warming oven. So it's keeping things warm or heating things back up. And all of this extra heat is letting us dry things as well. The drying rack here. So all good stuff, right? All things to make life easier. The downside is right here. So the bells have very little to do with what's actually happening in the kitchen. They're more to call the servants to different parts of the house. So certainly you as a servant are running in and out of the basement, but you're not standing here all day just waiting for them to ring. There's lots of other things to do. Instead, you're listening while you're working in other parts of the house. And as you can see, there's lots of different wires up here at the top. So you simply turn a handle, plug the wire, rings one of 11 bells from different parts of the house. Now, the problem with the bells is they all look the same, and they sound very similar. If you're done to tell that apart, if you can't, I guess you don't work here, right? Now, as much as the cook and the scullery maid and the downstairs staff are ignoring them, the servants upstairs are listening very closely, but the cook would get to ring her own bell, which is the meal bell, just here.
So just next to the door frame, this little hook that rings a bell upstairs. So you can hear how well the sound travels between the floors. And that's the signal that the dumbwaiter, our food elevator, is ready to go upstairs, and that is conveniently right next to the kitchen, so the cook can load it up and then unload from it. Thank you, Erin. So if you want to follow me to see the dumbwaiter just through this door.
I think move it, I think I know what it is.
So the bedroom next to the kitchen is for the cook. The cook is the most important female servant in the whole house, so she's paid better than the other female servants. She's second only to the butler. That's because she needs to be able to be a fantastic cook, of course, but also read and write and do math. One of the other rooms that she has to manage is this room right here. That's where they store dry food. A lot of those things are imported, like tea, coffee, sugar, chocolate, spices. Those things are very expensive because they're imported. So that room is locked up, and the cook keeps a close eye on what goes in and what goes out. This room here is the servants' hall. So we have the space that servants could spend their free time. Meals would be had here, and the female servants slept in the bedrooms at the back. Male servants slept above the horses in the hayloft, so that's the second floor of the building that we met in. It's really nice for this time period. Even though we're in a basement, we're below ground, but the ceiling still feels so high, the floors are finished. A lot of floors would be unfinished in basements back then. And there's these So to see so many glass windows in the basement of all places for the servants, solitary, it was cozy. It was a nice place to be. And it was better than most middle-class houses, and servants are considered below middle class back then. So they're definitely being treated very well, and they're living quite comfortably now. So this is a workroom. It's probably a space that had a bunch of different uses. They probably did many chores on tasks in here. If you look underneath the table, there's that circular feature. If you lifted that board up, there would be a water tank, an underground cistern underneath. So they collected rainwater all over the property and held it in tanks underground. And that's why the pump in the kitchen could pull water directly up from there, even from the early construction in the 1830s. So this room had access to water as well. And that brick feature in the corner, that's where they could boil water. So there's space for a fire underneath that basin. There's also a small paper vault in this corner. So there's 2 metal doors on this little room, brick and stone walls and floors to keep everything safe from fire, water, and theft. McNabb was the person who built this house was a businessman, a politician, and a lawyer, so he had a lot of important paperwork. But that room is so big, we think he probably rented out space in it to other people as well that couldn't put something like this in their own house. The little hole in the wall there is on purpose. That's so that you can see the original foundation from Richard Beasley's time period. So that inner layer is from the 1790s, and the stone around it, that's from the 1830s. So when Sir Allan McNabb bought the property, he took that old house, he added a second floor and wings on either side and wrapped the whole thing in limestone. So when we head down into this hallway, we'll be in the original floor plan of that older house. Right now we're in an extension added by Sir Allan McNabb in the 1830s. Just a reminder to keep your mask on during the tour, okay? So just down this hallway we have a series of storage rooms. We went past some houses she started as down as 8 or 9. Here, the 1851 census wine, those are imported, so very expensive. But beer can be made locally or even in-house, which makes it the most affordable choice. So the family upstairs would drink beer. Of course, they also had those fancy imported things. And the servants would have almost exclusively beer. Because they hydrated, it's not like they're getting drunk on the job drinking it. It was seen as sort of a health drink, kind of like a smoothie, like you take your beer almost. It's called liquid bread. So it was seen as a health drink, not just like something to drink for fun. Okay, so that's our last room of the basement. We're going to head upstairs now. This is an original staircase, so it's fairly steep. So please sanitize and use the handrail and follow me upstairs. Yeah, and this is the casual room for the upstairs. It's only going to get fancier.
So
Okay. So this is our small drawing room. It's the everyday family space in this house. So this is where the kids could do their homework and play piano, where they would have breakfast and tea together, where the family might read the newspaper and play cards. We're going to see the formal fancy version of this in just a little bit. This is very casual in comparison to what we're going to see coming up. So you can follow me into the front hall now. So our front hall is the first impression of the home. That's the front door right over there. So guests would enter the house into this room. So this seems to be a good first impression of the home. So we've got high ceilings, these huge, big, bright windows. These floors are much fancier than what we saw in the basement, though. These floors were added by the second owner after Sir Allan McNabb. So they're younger than the rest of the house, but they're too pretty to just tear up or cover up, so we're going to keep them. They're almost 150 years old, so they're still pretty old, and we're standing on them even today. The walls are a recreation of what was here in the 1840s. If you look in between the doors, you can see that little discolored patch. That's the original work from the 1840s, and everything else is recreated to match it. This is a very popular trend in this time period, a faux marble effect. You might think that it should be real marble in a fancy house like this, but this was the trendy option. And this is hand-painted by someone that's very talented, so it took a very long time, which means it's also a very expensive thing to have on the wall. Even if it isn't real marble, it's a very expensive option. And then of course the staircase is a wonderful feature in this room. It's a floating staircase, that means it's attached to the top and the bottom. And originally it was not supported underneath or on the side at all, though now it does have a support post on it, which isn't doing anything structurally, it's just there for peace of mind more than anything else. We'll actually use that staircase at the end of our tour, and you'll see that it's very sturdy still. My house is from the 1920s to this gentleman right here. This was born at the end of 1700, 1798, in what's now Niagara on the Lake. Like the rest of the men in his family, he served in the military during the War of 1812. He was really young though, he was only 14 and 15, which was young even for the time. He managed to get into law school because of those good connections that his family had. Oh, I forgot to mention, those are the modern chairs. So if you'd like to have a seat on the main floor of the upstairs, you can have a seat on those chairs, the green leather seats. It's hard to get into at that point in time. It was even more exclusive than it is today. And he didn't make his money from law. He actually made his money from buying and selling land amongst a bunch of the drawing room. Probably the most iconic room in the house. I had to move some of the stanchions earlier, but this one moved back. So, the drawing room is the formal entertaining space. That small room that we saw right when we came to the main floor, that was the everyday family space. This is for special occasions and fancy entertaining. So we've got even higher ceilings, even bigger windows, and we've got the most fancy and formal version of everything in this room here. Children wouldn't be invited into this room except on Christmas, which is of course how the most important holiday to them, but they were living in Canada and so they were probably celebrating it at least a little bit. This is a representation of some Victorian lights. So if you look underneath the table, you might be able to see a bucket. That's a fire bucket. That I want to point out my favorite toy under the tree though.
The stove.
It's the stove, yes. It's the easy bake oven of the 1850s.
And kettle,
Yeah.
and pot,
And it would actually work. You can see little wood chips
They're
inside.
real,
You could
yeah.
really set that on fire and the
wow.
whole thing would get hot and you could cook a tiny little cake just like an easy bake oven.
And
So,
your house.
pardon?
And your house.
in the
Yes.
kitchen, it's like it.
So
It has
there's-
little pot and little pan.
So stove makers would make these models of the stoves that they sell, and then you could, and then they would have those to show because it's harder to move a whole stove. Those are really, really heavy, so these smaller ones are more portable. And then along the way, they became available as sort of like a playhouse option. So this would be something that small children could play with. Hopefully not on fire. That would be a little bit dangerous for small fingers, but I mean, easy bake ovens still exist to this day, so we clearly like that as an idea. Okay. Then another wonderful feature on our Christmas tree that I like to point out is there's presents on our tree. And those presents have a little paper tag tied to them that's got a number on them. That matches the silver dish with paper slips on the table. On Christmas Day, you could pull a slip of paper number on the tree, and that would be one of your presents. It's kind of like Secret Santa, or White Elephant, or Yankee Swap, whatever you like to call it. So there would be practical things. Decorations of the tree would be actual presents. Oh, yeah, I wasn't going to point that out, but I like your eye. There's lots of glitz on this tree too. That's definitely not how everyone would be decorating.
There are a few little things.
Yeah. I wanted to point out the painting over there, so not even on the tree at all. She's one of the girls that lived in this house, one of the daughters of Sir Alan MacNab, and she wrote a diary when she was 12 years old that is one of our best resources in this house. We had it out for this morning, but you can see that book on the table. That's what is available in the gift shop, and it should be pink. We've gone a little overboard with the pink, to be honest. Victorians like to mix color and pattern even more than this. But like a broken clock is right twice a day, and everything is pink, then some of it's past. One family at a time goes into it, so that also gives opportunity to take more pictures or take this room in if you like. But if the first family would like to check that out, it just sort of chooses.